Namaskar friends. Today I propose to discuss with all of you a very frightening concept in the field of literary criticism theory, which has been introduced to the syllabi of many of the universities in India as well as abroad: structuralism. Actually friends, structuralism is not so much frightening as it appears to you. It appears to you frightening just because you just have certain informations about structuralism in any of the anthologies which are available today in the market for the purposes of studies. If you try to understand structuralism with your attempt of correlating structuralism with your own cultural surroundings, it will appear to you as easy as anything, like enjoying a movie, like enjoying a beautiful literary text, like enjoying a dining out experience at the weekends. Friends, let us begin our today's class of structuralism with two examples. I would like to begin my talk, my ideas about structuralism. All of you have read Aristotle's Poetics. What is it? I say it today. It is the first attempt of introducing structuralism into the understanding of a literary text. Aristotle gives us certain basic tenets about tragedy. What is an ideal tragedy? What are the chief constituents of tragedy which make a tragedy praiseworthy, which make a tragedy writer phenomenal, popular, remarkable, by following all these precepts? So Aristotle's Poetics is first example of introducing structuralism into our understanding of a literary text. Second, E.M. Forster's Aspects of a Novel. This also deals with the structure of a different literary genre, that is novel. It discusses with plot, character, structure, situation, language, etc., which make a novel a novel. So structuralism is also a same kind of attempt to introduce certain new precepts, new strategy, new modus operandi of understanding a literary text, and it is new because all of their ideas, almost all, have been imported from the philosophy of language. And who is the remarkable figure here? He was Ferdinand de Saussure, a Swiss linguist, and later who has been known as popular as father of modern linguistics. This Ferdinand de Saussure was not giving you anything new, rather he was trying to rework, he was trying to reinvent something new from the age old Indian philosophy about language, and which has been introduced to the world by our great Maharshi Panini and Patanjali. Panini's Ashtadhyay was a much interesting, amazing work which has attracted Ferdinand de Saussure's imagination, and he also started talking about language into certain structures. For example, his first structure is that every word has two basic structures. One is signifier, another is signified. Signifier, signified. This communion of signifier and signified make a word. Then he has again given us two structures, lang and parole. Lang is actual competence for speech, and parole is performance. Then there is syntagmatic and paradigmatic structure of language. These ideas have struck the imagination of structuralist critics in 1930s and 40s when they started introducing the idea of structuralism into the academic field. So for a better understanding, simple understanding and easier understanding of structuralism, I will divide my talk, my presentation into 4 or 5 parts. First is the history of structuralism. Prague linguistic circle, which gave birth to an important impetus to structuralism, was born in October 1926. Although structuralism is an intellectual movement and is first seen in the work of an anthropologist, Claude Lévi-Strauss, but the germs of structuralism could be traced back to Ferdinand de Saussure's concept about language, lang and parole. This history of structuralism gives us a clear indication that structuralism is deeply connected with linguistics. How it is connected with linguistics and what impact linguistics leaves on structuralism is useful to know, to learn, in order to understand deeply and correctly what structuralism is. Saussure claims that the meaning which we give to words are purely arbitrary. These meanings are determined by convention only. No word can be defined in isolation, but the meaning and definition of a word depends upon its position and situation in a syntagmatic chain, or in other words, on its relational aspect. This thinking about language, that language is arbitrary, relational and constitutive, greatly influenced the structuralist critics because it gave them a model which is self-contained and in which individual items relate to larger structures and thus creating large structures. The essence of structuralism thus is in the belief that things cannot be defined in isolation. Its meaning depends upon its position and situation in a syntagmatic chain. It suggests that meaning or significance is not a kind of core or essence inside the text. Rather, meaning is always outside. And to analyze this meaning, the structuralists analyze mainly prose narrative, relating the text to some larger containing structure, such as the convention of a particular literary genre, a network of intertextual connections, or a notion of narrative as a complex of recurrent patterns and motifs. Now, there is not any one facet of structuralism. Rather, structuralism is an amalgamation of different concepts propounded by different critics belonging to different nations, claiming for themselves a universal acclaim. For example, Vladimir Prop is a Russian critic, Gerard Gennet is a German critic, Tazvitan Todro and Roland Barthes were French critics, Jonathan Kuller is an US American critic. What is the basic principle of structuralism? What is their basic strategy, modus operandi, what they do to study and understanding of a literary text? Actually, it is well known that structuralist critics are not much interested in the interpretation of a literary text. Rather, they try to make or constitute a kind of poetics which may stand for literature as linguistics stand for language, propagating the essential conditions of meaning. They try to divide literature in certain structures taken from the different domains of life, like language, culture, fashion, menus, architecture, landscape, marriage, furniture, politics, etc. They believe that literature is made of all these things, and while undergoing a literary text, a literary critic must explore all these structures into the understanding of a literary text. They proposes three kinds of structure: thematic structure, the sequence of action of the theme; the structure of linear structure, second is linear structure, and third is the structure of narration. Take for example the second, linear structure, because it is new and given to us by the Russian critic Vladimir Prop in his book Morphology of the Folk Tales. He has given us 31 different kind of structures invariably present in every folk lore. These 31 structures help us in understanding a given literary text. I am not going to enumerate all the 31 structures one by one, but I would like to give you certain initial structures which he has talked about. First is absentation, second is interdiction, third is violation, fourth is reconnaissance, and likewise. These structures fix the conditions of meaning of a literary text. In the same way, A.G. Grimas, he has talked about the thematic structure, and he has introduced 6 actants as characters. Characters are structuralized as 6 actants, and these 6 actants are sender, object, receiver, helper, subject, and opponent. If we take example of Hamlet, we can categorize the different characters into these 6 different actants. First is sender. The ghost is the sender in Hamlet who incites Hamlet for taking revenge. Object, second actant is object, and that is to punish the guilty. Third is receiver who takes the message, who receives the message from given by the sender. It is Hamlet, of course. Fourth is helper who helps the main character, the protagonist, in executing his liability. Fifth is subject who is the hero. Sixth is opponent. If there is a hero, there is a counter hero, opponent, Claudius. So these structures divide a literary text into different structures, and they fix the meaning which the readers derive while reading a literary text. But the most important are the codes introduced by phenomenal critic Roland Barthes in his book SZ 1975. In this book, he has tried to make a study of Balzac's short stories, and he has introduced 5 codes. These 5 codes are the proeretic code, indication of action; the hermeneutic code, evoking narrative suspense; the cultural code, reference to common knowledge; the semic code, connotative code; the symbolic code, linked to theme. A structuralist critic looks for parallels, echoes, reflections, contrasts, and patterns in plot, structure, character, situation, and language. Jonathan Culler, the American structuralist critic, looks for he creates binary oppositions in his book Structuralist Poetics 1975. He says binary oppositions are fundamental not only to our understanding of a literary text but also in the basic principles of nature. For example, if there is masculine, there will be a feminine. If there is night, there will be day. If there is light, there will be darkness. If there is straight, there will be crooked, ugly, beautiful, etc. So it is these certain essential structures which structuralist critics have introduced for the readers, for students, for all those who are lover of literature, for understanding a literary text into certain kind of structures. Roland Barthes, who was a great advocate of structuralist, later refuted his own earlier presumptions and moved on to a certain new dimension. He says no literary text can be confined into a certain structure because meaning is fluid. Jacques Derrida was bringing a new idea, and here we will have to stop because this switching off from structuralism to post-structuralism will lead us to a different kind of philosophy, different kind of understanding of a literary text, to which we shall come in our next episode while we shall be discussing about post-structuralism. But today for structuralism, in the last, I would like to say that in our own culture it is said Shabd Brahm hai. Structuralism also says word is the core, and not only the word but the meaning is core, and this meaning can be correlated to a certain structures which will help and enable us to our understanding of a literary text. They also give emphasis on signifiers, not on the signifiers, because signifier remains same, signifiers keep changing. So Ferdinand de Saussure's basic focus is on signifiers, and that is why the structuralist critics focus merely on the printed literary text and its correlation to certain structures. Thank you very much, dear friends, for today. I hope I have tried to give you certain basic principles which will help you, which will enable you to understand what structuralism actually is. Thank you. We shall meet again.